Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup.
Okay, anyway, now let's go to Ohio. This is where we're going to slow down, right? This is really an important case. And look, this is very Ohio specific, but it's not, because the alleged failures in what we're about to talk about are extremely common. All right, the backing without a spotter, without maybe working equipment. We'll talk about all this. Okay, so what we have is we have a court decision that said, and we have a lawsuit that alleges, very simply, the fire was over. The driver of a tanker or some sort of shuttle.
I'm assuming it was a tanker, but yeah.
Right. And by the way, I don't want to offend our wildland people. It wasn't a tanker.
Oh,
right.
Come on.
We have the right words, right? Where we have the water shuttle, but it's not a tanker because that would be a plane. I don't want to offend our wildland people. So he's backing it up. He receives orders, go dump your water. I don't understand that at all. But because we return full, right? Leave it full.
I don't think the fire was out. I think they were looking for additional water. I think that I'm assuming that when he wanted them to dump their water, he meant dump it in a tank.
Oh, okay. The way I read it was like, get rid of it, not, okay, fill it. Right. Okay, perfect. Or dump it into the pond.
That's how I interpreted it.
Well, that's a significant fact. That makes a lot more sense. So here's what happened. So this driver of a water shuttle, right? Tender.
There's 4,000 tankers, and because of like 50 to 100 airplanes that also carry water, we got to change the name of 4,000 pieces of apparatus to call it something that somebody.
But it's a tender, right? It's a tender. I get for my NIMS fans. Yeah. So, well, because NIMS, even though NIMS actually came from 1935 from a guy named Henry Fail, which no one but me actually understands, really. But we copied it from the Fire Service, or the Wildland Fire Service. So they win. Anyway, so we have a tender. He receives orders, go dump your water, I presume, into a portable pond. That makes way more sense now. Thank you. And as he does that, he backs over two elderly people who are allowed to be in the area. That's the first big mistake, and as we all know. But
I think it was either their daughter's mobile home or one of their family members' mobile home.
Right, and they say, okay, stand over here, right? But nonetheless, they're still in an active area. The allegedly, and these are all allegations, right? And in fact, even at this point, because it's a motion to dismiss, don't worry, I'll catch everyone up, I'll explain it. But this is just a court decision saying there's a lot of questions of fact. So I'm going to keep saying allegedly because these are still just allegations. So allegedly, well, unquestionably, he backs over the couple, drags one of them, I think kills one, drags the other.
No, they both died.
Both died. Okay. And by the way, this is back in 21. But and so there's failures that are noted, right? And let's talk about the failures for a second before we get Ohio specific. Failure. They said the backup alarm wasn't working. Failure. We didn't train you to always use a spotter. Failure. You didn't comply with a policy that may have required to use a spotter. And by the way, please don't ever back up, especially when you're filling water, right? If you're dumping, I do tanker dumps all the time. I've done those forever because we're a rural area. I'm sure you are too in some areas, and always use a spotter. There's no rush. There's somebody there who should be at the fill site or at the dump site, right? But always use a spotter. And if you don't, this is what you're going to be faced with. So it's not worth your life. Or somebody else's life. It's not worth your freedom or your money. So in any event, those are the facts. They move, the fire department sued, right? And I think
the family sued the fire department and the driver of the apparatus.
Right.
And,
so
the fire department moved to dismiss the suit.
Right. And it's complicated by a couple of things, which is Ohio statute specific. Now, start with, this is a West Virginia fire department. I think it's a private, right? A fire company, not municipal.
Exactly. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, right?
Which is the issue, because now they're coming over state lines into a state which only protects, apparently, in this case, municipal fire departments, right? With at least this statute. So the question is whether the statute protected the firefighter and the fire department, One question was, are they a municipal fire department or not? I don't think we need to get too far off on that. But the big question was, under this statute, was the fire under control or not? And now that you have said, well, it appears that he was ordered to dump the water into a pond, right, a portable pond. Well, if you're doing that, to me, the fire's not over. I don't care whether
the fire may be, and you know, you've been there as I have. You know, the fire's under control, but it still is active. We're still right. You know, working on overhaul. We've still got some, you know, and depending on the circumstances, there may still have been quite a bit of fire. It's just that, you know, it's not going, the building's gone, and there's not much we're going to be able to do to save it, but it's going to take us a while to finish overhaul. And
right, we're not going to let it keep sparking and sparks fly in the air to land on something else, right? We're still putting it out. But this is where people have to understand. Every firefighter is sitting here saying overhaul is part of the fire scene. Yeah, but the judge isn't a firefighter. So that's why people have to understand.
And probably neither are the attorneys.
Yeah, well,
you know, be like us trying to argue about an appendectomy, and you know, we're not doctors, and we're trying to explain, and the judge isn't a doctor, and you know, so it's the same phenomena happens.
Yep. And so we think, oh, this is no big deal. I mean, not the backing up part, but of course the fire is going. But for the judge, the court didn't understand it. The judge and the lawyer probably didn't explain it as well as they could have. All that happens here is the fire company and the driver move to dismiss the lawsuit, saying we're protected by immunity. And the judge says too many questions of fact at this time to be able to dismiss the suit, and doesn't do that. And doesn't dismiss it, says we're going to let it keep going forward through discoveries, and then we'll see what happens. But the point that's real that I take from this, right, is this is a situation, forget the fire department, right? Let's focus on two facts. One, you killed two people. Intentionally or isn't the fact, right? It was an accident. Of course it was an accident. But were you, and this is going to be one of the questions, how negligent were you? Because immunity, as in many states, governmental immunity, as in many states, doesn't apply when you weren't merely negligent. You were grossly negligent, you were wanton, you were reckless, a higher level of carelessness. And the judge says, we can't tell whether they weren't. And I will tell everyone, if you back up a vehicle without a spotter, you're nuts, period. End of case, end of story. You don't know if there are kids watching the fire trucks, right? Fire trucks attract kids. Don't back up a fire truck without, and this, we just did one a month ago, and these happen all the time, right? We had one a month ago where they backed up into somebody. I think that went more favorably for the fire department, but just don't do it. To me, take the 30 seconds to get somebody out of the vehicle and be spotted to make sure it's clear.
The best way to avoid liability is to prevent liability creating events from occurring. Backing up without a spotter is a potential liability creating event. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
And yet we think, oh, it's an emergency. Now, was it urgent to quickly dump water? Probably not. And that's where I think the court really is going to ultimately focus. There was no urgency to allow you to dismiss the need for a spotter. But again, I hate to say it, I mean, take off our need, your and my need to defend the fire service, which we vehemently want to do all the time. But in this case, was it really that urgent? I mean, you're at a dump site. Isn't there somebody there, right? That's at the pond backing you in or having you pull up or telling you when it's full. I mean, there should have been somebody there. Yeah. Here's the problem, though, and I have a suspicion, because I don't want, I'd love to hear from the firefighter involved, but it's possible. Think of it this way. You're a mutual aid department, as they were. They pull up to the dump site, right? And maybe they had to back in, and I don't like backing in at dump sites. There's too many people around. Bad idea if you can avoid it. However, think who's backing you up or not. They're not from your department. Right. They may very well, you're just in a long line of tankers coming from somewhere, right? There could be 10, 20, 30 departments unrelated to whoever's got the dump control of the dump site. Interestingly, here is, why isn't the fire department, and maybe they are, but I don't think so. You tell me, Curt, why isn't the fire department, who is in control of the dump site, a defendant here?
Yeah, probably because the attorneys involved don't understand what happens, and they're looking just at the owner of the vehicle and the driver of the vehicle, and they're not looking at the bigger issue. And also the other side of it may be that they've already concluded that the local fire department has immunity. So again, one of the interesting parts about this Ohio case, to me anyway, is their very narrow scope of who the immunity applies to. It applies to a municipality, no question,
Right.
when you're providing a fire department. It can extend to a volunteer fire company, a 501c3, if the municipality has an agreement. Well, this is, number one, a municipality in a different state. So that's probably number one. Problem number two, and they didn't talk much about this, but it was mentioned in the decision, was that the agreement between the, the Williamstown, West Virginia Fire Department and the town of Williamstown had expired. So now but that was another thing that the judge said that's a question of fact, whether or not it was still valid, whether or not
They
it
still called them in.
all that, right? Those are all things that are going to have to go through the at least not at this stage. They're not going to dismiss it on a motion to dismiss. It might be decided summary judgment further down the road, but it's not something that he felt should be decided on a motion to dismiss.
Right. So there are, look, if you and I were defending this, God forbid prosecuting it, right? But if you and I were defending this, which is normally where we would be, we would have a firefighter's view of how that scene should have operated, may have operated. And again, the lawyer who's defending this may have no fire background to understand what's actually happening at a dump site. So and these matter. I think these facts matter, because if somebody else is in control of the dump site and says, okay, go there and dump, and they got instructions, who knows? Who knows? Maybe there was a conversation. Hey, yeah, just go over there. You're clear. Nobody's around. Don't worry about the old people. I don't know. There's a lot more, but this is very early. We are certainly, to me, this may go to trial. This may not. It depends on what their insurance limits are, or if it's even insured. In some states, when you're on a border state, and I've seen this, there are fire companies who go over the border. I just dealt with one between New York and New Jersey, and I forced the New Jersey department, who's bringing one of my New York clients into them. I said, you bet, I want separate insurance. They're like, oh, we got a state law. I want separate insurance for that company going over out of state. Who knows? Right? I mean,
you have to research it. And I mean, you can't assume that your insurance or even your laws. I remember when I wrote legal considerations for fire and emergency services, there was an interesting case where, and I forget what's the two states were, but in one state, workers comp covered the employee and extended to volunteers. But the firefighter who came from a different state had a different law. I forget, it might have been the opposite. So the question was, was the host fire department's insurance the primary insurance, or was the responding department's insurance the primary insurance? It was a battle between two insurance companies. It wasn't, the firefighter was going to get paid one way or the other. Point being, though, what if one of those companies didn't have insurance? And I think that's the thing to think about. So every state has different laws on liability, workers' comp, immunity. These are the things that have to be researched when it comes to mutual aid agreements.
Yeah. So, and let me leave people with this then, because I literally just did this about 2 weeks ago for a client, again, New York, New Jersey border. One, if you're on a border state and you could possibly respond, you need an agreement. I don't care what the law says. Get an agreement. What type of agreement? It's an indemnification agreement. It says if we do something that causes us to get sued, you pay for us, you provide us insurance. Two, you better have somebody who knows how to read those, because if I'm drafting it on behalf of the requesting department, I'm saying, yeah, unless you're negligent or grossly negligent or reckless, I'm not going to cover your reckless or intentional acts, right? So then now you have no insurance. So now you need to look at your own insurance to make sure you have insurance for going to another state. Mm-hmm. Do not just blindly agree to go into another state. There's a ton of issues. And to your point on the workers' comp, New York State, for example, only just recently amended its laws to cover us if we go into Canada or somewhere else, to give us comp coverage. They didn't used to do that. In fact, they didn't used to cover us if we went into New Jersey or Connecticut or PA. So please, before you go into a border state or country, right, make sure you talk to a knowledgeable attorney to research the law. This matters.
One of the things that we have here, we have, it's called the I think it's Southern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. It's got an acronym there, but it covers the region that we're in, but it's a mutual aid pact. So we don't have individual mutual aid agreements,
Sure,
but it's a mutual aid pact. But and I think the pacts are a better way to handle it. Okay, but where you don't, like the Rhode Island fire chiefs really were instrumental in getting that organized. But if you don't have a chiefs organization or another organization to get it organized, then you're stuck with having individual agreements, which I think can be burdensome for each department. It's good for lawyers, but it's not necessarily good for fire departments.
and not good for the insurance companies. But hey, if you don't tell your insurance company you're going into another state or you're bringing people in, they may not know.